Good evening and welcome. This is Blue Wave Radio. I'm having a discussion tonight with Bosman Grobler, and we are going to talk about the purpose of Blue Wave Radio. Bosman, good evening.
Good day, Richard. Always nice to spend time with you, and always nice to have a little bit of a deeper discussion around whatever we need to discuss on Blue Wave Radio.
Right, let's get started. The origin of Blue Wave Radio was a discussion we effectively had at a braai, where we said that there's so much noise out there but very little information. So even if one wishes to discuss a critical point regarding the politics, the actual information is quite hard to come by. So we decided to set up this platform via YouTube and via podcasts where the general public could fairly easily access party-related information via their iPhones or their smartphones. And the eventual plan is to educate the general public prior to this election coming up on 8 May.
Yes, I think there's a few important things that we'll mention. And the first one that I think makes this platform very nice is the accessibility thereof. You are not bound to specific airing times by the SABC or any other channel. You are not bound by a starting time and a finishing time. You can listen to Blue Wave Radio whenever you want to, whether it's in your car or whether it's in your workshop. You can put your earphones on and you can listen to the podcast. When you need to take a break, you can press pause and you can continue whenever you want to. So we are not bound by specific time slots. And I think that's the first thing that's very important about this platform.
Yes, I think the main problem with broadcast media is the bandwidth. And getting 6 guys in a studio to have a panel discussion and each shouting off their little rhyme of big words, trying to invoke some kind of an emotional response from everybody else, and then taking an ad break is, to be fair, actually counterproductive. Because it only elicits emotion. It doesn't clarify the point. And by using long-form discussions such as this one, we'll be able to clarify a large number of points for the voting public.
Yes, I think that's 100% what we're trying to do here, is to try to create a platform which is easily accessible. And then we want to go into deeper discussions than you'll find either on your short videos that's circulated on WhatsApp or on Facebook. A little bit more than just, I heard something and I forwarded it, or I shared it, or I retweeted it, and something a little bit more than the populistic politicking. Real discussions on real policies, and even further than just the policies is the scenarios behind policies, the reason why policies are there, the reason why they are created, and their influence on the bigger world when they are implemented. Because sometimes there's a lot more behind a policy than just the 3 or 5 lines you hear on the debate you just referred to.
The other thing which I think Blue Wave Radio is going to help a lot with is the fact that broadcast media is run by the ANC, and they choose the time and they choose effectively they edit out anything they don't want the voting public to know, whether directly or indirectly. And we've seen it in so many elections before where the fight becomes on how many minutes each party got the week before the election. And with Blue Wave Radio and with YouTube, we can effectively bypass that system. And the nice thing about social media or networking in that manner is that technology allows anyone to almost share everything. And if we can get this out to our activist base, we can really penetrate let's call it the voter market.
Yes, I agree. And, Richard, the problem with the SABC is that it is a state-owned enterprise. They have their rules, but they directly give proportional time or airtime to representation of the party. And I think if you look at election or material aired on the SABC closer to the election, it's very clear that the ANC is involved in the SABC and that the SABC favors ANC.
Yes, and the emotional part of it, there's not real facts in there. You'll see for the few months coming, there's about 2 months before the election, and you'll see SABC Kids TV on 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll find video material coming from the apartheid state of 30 years ago. White policemen chasing around black people with shambox. Now, that may have been relevant 20 years ago, but it's no longer relevant. The only thing that does is it creates emotional disturbances. It creates emotional voting. And I think South Africa has reached the point where we need to start voting with our heads instead of just with our hearts.
I think that's a great point. And I think as South Africa, we need to move forward beyond the point of racial identification. We need to move beyond the point of emotional choices. And we need to say, what do we need as South Africans in the form of service delivery? Regardless of your race, your gender, your socioeconomic status, your religion for that matter, we all need services. And if we can get past the fact that our history is a bad history and that there's a lot of bad things that happened, and rather to the point where we say, let's focus on the future and let's build a country where people can live, then I think we'll be in a better spot. The fact is, Richard, the ANC has only got the race card left because they don't have a good record of service delivery. They don't have any track record to speak of on any department or any entity in this country. The only thing that they've got left to stay in power, and remember, it's important to stay in power because then you make the decisions around the budget. The only thing that they've got left is the race card. So closer to the election, they will need to drive the race wedge or the racial wedge, like other parties will also do, because that's what they focus on. And the sad thing about that is that's not going to help anybody when it comes to services.
And I'm going to make a very controversial statement here, which may or may not go down well, but in my opinion, South Africa is no longer a racist state. It's not a racially divided state. Yes, I agree. There's on the fringes, there's some idiots that's still driving outdated policies. But South Africa is not a racially divided state. You can see people of every color standing in a queue at the bank. Not happily, because they're standing in a queue, but no one's fighting and swearing at one another. Every now and again, there's an idiot that's making a noise, but there are idiots everywhere.
Let me just join you in that. I think it's important to say that if you speak to the larger part of the population, and I would say a ballpark figure of 97% across all races, genders, cultures, religions, socioeconomic status, we would all agree that we want good services, that we want to stay in a safe community, that we want good quality education, and that we want quality healthcare for ourselves and our families. I think we would all agree mostly on that. And if we as 97% of South Africans can agree on that, and we can focus on that when we vote, then we are actually focusing on the right things, because that's the purpose of a government, to provide those things, not to be busy with all kinds of politicking and shenanigans that drive either racial wedges or wedges wherever they can to get a certain part or percentage of the vote to get 1 or 2 or 5 seats.
The group identities politic thing.
Absolutely.
That is going on everywhere. There's 2 points I want to make. The first point is the inequalities of the past and the atrocities of the past and the whole history thing. The fact is, if you go and look at history is a messy business. Doesn't matter from which side of the world you come from. History has always been a messy business. And the fact that we are all alive and that we are here is testimony at least to our survival or our ability to survive. And if you go and dig in any person's history, a couple of generations, you'll find all kinds of horrible things happen to people. And to use history as the starting point for your philosophy, I think is a terrible idea, because then you never look forward. You're always driving with your eyes on the mirror instead of where you're going. The other thing I want to touch on is democracy is a system that has been developed, at least in the Judeo-Christian environment, in the Western environment, over 3,000 or 4,000 years. The whole basis of democracy is in the concept that every individual has some spark of divinity. If we go back to Genesis on that, is where man is created in the image of God. I don't want to get into a theological argument here, but the point is, and the basis of democracy is that every individual has value and every individual's opinion has value. But with that value comes a tremendous amount of responsibility, because to keep the ship sailing straight, every individual needs to add his vote, and a responsible vote, not an emotional vote. And if we can get that message across, that freedom is not only doing as you please, freedom is actually granted to you to be able to exercise your responsibility. These two things run hand in hand. You can't have absolute freedom. Absolute freedom is anarchy. Anarchy is chaos. And chaos only leaves suffering in its wake. Whereas if you accept the responsibility for your life, including the responsibility for your political affiliation or the state of the nation, then you can make decisions based on conscience, on morality, and intelligent, non-emotional decisions that can take the state forward.
Richard, I think you make the point excellent, and I'll just reiterate that by, on point number 1, where you touched on history, say history is important, but it should be a very small part of our focus, because you don't want to make the same mistakes that you made in the past. So take note of history, but focus on the future. And then the second thing, where you spoke about your vote and your responsibility, it's very, very important to know that you as an individual has got the right to make your vote and to change your vote and to keep your vote as a secret for yourself. Because I think that's also a message that the ANC drives, that either they will know what you voted, or that you should vote for them because they are still the liberators. Whether that's true or not, I suppose, is a debate we can have in this forum. But the fact that you should vote for them because your grandfather or your grandparents voted for them, your parents voted for them, and therefore you should also vote for them. That is not true. Your vote is something that's yours, that you are allowed to change and to use to exercise your power. And if you're not happy with what you get, you're allowed to change your vote.
You should change it. Not allowed to, you should, because if you keep voting the way you did, someone said madness is not running into a brick wall repeatedly. It's expecting a different result every time you do it.
Yes.
And if you're going to be voting ANC again, and you think that things are going to be better afterwards, you're making a mistake.
Again, that's another topic we can discuss in this forum, but because the ANC is driving this notion that with the new president, Ramaphosa, it's a different vehicle and there's a new dawn and all these promises. The fact is, it's the same bus with a different driver. The organizational culture is that of corruption, is that of poor service delivery, is that of looking after ourselves and not after the needs of the community. And that's not going to change even if you change the head of the organization, because the organizational culture is already there.
Yeah, it's just a figurehead.
I think it's important also to invite people to take part, because in this discussion in the last 5 minutes, we identified 2 or 3 topics that we can speak about. And I think our listeners will have ideas, will have questions, will have inputs. And I think we can invite them to have an input on this forum, to write to us and to make sure that their needs, their topics and their questions are discussed with us.
Yes, they can use our email address. Our email address is bluewaveradioda@gmail.com. We are open to any kind of suggestions, questions, and if someone wants to join in the conversation, you're more than welcome. There's just one thing I want to touch on in closing, and that is the end of apartheid really started rolling at the end of the 80s, 88, 89, when F.W. de Klerk became president. And it rolled into the early 90s when Mandela was freed, and it culminated in the 94 election. And the first 4 years under the Mandela regime, we were on an emotional high, and it really seemed like we were taking the high road. And South Africa was going to become a force to be reckoned with. After Mandela retired, first there was Thabo Mbeki, who had his weird agendas, and then he was replaced by the Zumanites. And things are going backwards very, very quickly. And I want to urge every voter to really consider where are we going? And is this worth it? Loyalty to Nelson Mandela is one thing, but staying on a sinking ship might be quite a different thing. And with that, I want to end, and I want to thank you, Bosman, for joining me here, and I hope we can continue these discussions shortly.
Yes, we're looking forward to a few discussions in the run-up to the election.